Welcome to The Herd, our weekly series on enterprise communication news with Dave Michaels and Zeus Caravala. I'm your producer, Kathleen Lassiter. We're back from Labor Day break and we've got a lot to cover, so let's dive in. We have a new vendor to cover this week, Lumen. What is Lumen?
Lumen is the new name for CenturyLink, and it's an interesting name because CenturyLink is kind of associated with the copper network. They wanted to update their image, but they're keeping the CenturyLink name. What do you think of that, Zeus? Does that make sense? Because trying to separate those.
Yeah, I think it makes sense to keep it on the consumer side. I'm expecting they'll eventually sell that off. To be frank, it's I don't know how much.
That's a good point.
Yeah, so I think if you want to sell it off, you keep it as its own entity, and then you sell that entity. But I do like the rebrand. I think it's a little more modern. It reminds me a lot of what they're trying to do is become more of a services company that solves problems that are centered around the network. Very much like back in the day when IBM was they were solving problems when they entered their services business that revolved around compute, right? And so the world's become network centric. There's no doubt about that with IoT and work from home and all this stuff. And what Lumen's trying to do is pivot their business to now being a little more strategic. So instead of selling copper and minutes and stuff like that, they want to actually try and solve business problems. And along with that, I think they wanted to shed the old telco image.
I think it makes a lot of sense from their perspective because they've acquired so many brands. It just let's just start over with a clean brand. But I'm here in Colorado, and I can't even remember all the names. We had Mountain Bell, we had Quest, we had US West before that actually, and then CenturyLink, and so now we're ready for a new one. Now it's Lumen.
Level 3 Global Crossing, those are all part of that.
Level, yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
They have a much bigger network than most people realize. And, they're global, but I think the name CenturyLink makes you think of them as almost a rural ILEC in some cases. It's a big one, but it's certainly not the type of company that they've become.
So let's move on. Both Five9 and Nice had their customer events this week.
Yeah, big week for contact centers, really. The In Contact and Nice event was actually, there were no announcements at that event. It was a customer event. They kind of clarified their portfolio and their vision. It was a nice event. They actually did theirs with a lot of Hollywood special effects and everything. Taking the virtual event to the next level. Wow. That is kind of nice. It's a refreshing change, but it's also a little bit of it feels a little too staged. One of the things I like about these events is the live speakers, and I feel they're a little more intimate when it's kind of less rehearsed, but very impressive production.
Yeah, well, they're hardly live, I guess, even the ones that are live. Right, most of those sessions tend to be recorded. The Five9 one, I thought they did show some good traction, though, in what they're doing with AI. It was really all about AI. At last year's customer event, they actually talked a lot about the things that were coming, and this year they actually brought it. And so you could say last year's event was more about vision, and this year's event was more about execution. And
from our perspective, that's nice because that shows consistency. They haven't changed their vision. They're executing on it.
Yeah, no, clearly I think AI is going to have the biggest transformative effect on the contact center since it moved to cloud, and I think that'll have a bigger effect. If you're looking just for another proof point, a little startup called Observe AI got a $54 million round of funding, and I'm expecting the VC community to actually start jumping all over this. I think over the next couple of years, we'll see a lot of startups come up, which will create a round of acquisition targets for companies like Five9 and Nice and Contact and Genesis and Avaya to go after.
So just to recap a little bit, Five9 had 3 significant announcements. I covered them in a No Jitter post. They took the traditional agent assist and the virtual agent to kind of a new level with some new capabilities, which I think is really important because a lot of the contact center companies are doing very, very similar messaging, and they're bringing new technologies in. They're using their own technology. On the agent assist, they've developed a really nice summarization technique. No one else has done that yet, to my knowledge, and so they've got this nice summary capability on agent assist. They also announced a new framework for recording, of all things, one of the most low-tech things in the world, and that's kind of the problem. It's an obsolete model in the new cloud-to-cloud era. So VoiceStream is an API model for recording. And one of the most clever things about VoiceStream, in my opinion, is that a lot of companies don't really want the recording. They want the speech to text conversion. And so they can now do the API not to get the recording, but to get the actual text conversion. And I think that's a very elegant design.
Yeah, and in fact, I think the summarization piece is interesting too, because when you get the whole speech to text, you just get this massive file, and you got to go look through, find what's important. And I think the summarization piece of it actually pulls out what's important, and so that'll actually speed up your ability to understand those transcripts.
That's really impressive. Let's move on. Google launched a new room system. What do you know about that?
Frankly, it's long overdue from Google. I think they're the one vendor that really hasn't had a lot of hardware. In fact, they just embraced phones last year, or was it maybe earlier this year? But I think that I think this is sort of a recognition that we're not going to work from home forever. We are going to go back to the office, and when we do that, we need room systems, and those room systems need to integrate with the stuff that we're using virtually. And so I think the world becomes this blending of physical meetings and virtual meetings. And Dave, you've talked about this in previous herds, where the importance of being able to bring virtual and physical together. And so what Google finally has now is a set of, from the pictures and stuff that I saw, it looks like pretty good tech that people can build, actually use Google now to build into rooms. And that was one of the things that was keeping them from being like a major UC vendor, but they're closing that gap now.
Well, the Series 1 is one step, right? Both Microsoft and Google have kind of moving from minimal viable product in their video capabilities to actually a very reasonable video package, and both companies are really raising the bar this year, 2020, in their video capabilities. The Series 1 equipment has a lot of horsepower. Actually, the price on it is pretty reasonable considering how much horsepower is in there. It's got an Intel i7. It's actually got 4 of the Google's TPU graphics chips in there for special effects. It's a tremendous amount of value. To the end users, though, it's pretty much not much different than the system that you can currently get with the Logitech and the Chromebox connection. There's still Chrome OS, and I haven't really made an opinion on that yet, but it's still Chrome OS. It's got facial tracking. Both of them have that. The Logitech is a little bit more expensive. The Logitech bundle is a little bit more expensive, but it's also got a little more elegance around the cabling design, and it's really competitive. But the amount of horsepower in the Series 1 is pretty impressive.
Yeah, and I think that horsepower is there for future, AI use cases, video, facial stuff like that. So a lot of these devices are loaded with GPUs and TPUs and things like that. So that's it's again showing sort of the impact that AI is going to have on this industry. You gotta load.
And one last thing I want to highlight on the Google announcement was they highlighted the ecological packaging. And I have to say, that is becoming more and more important to me. I'm amazed at how much crap and styrofoam we still have in so much of our packaging. And I'm glad that Google made a pretty big statement around climate change and what they're going to become carbon neutral. And I'm glad to see that's trickling down to their product packaging to being ecological focus.
Nice. So we are a little bit short on time, but Dave, do you have any thoughts on Twilio partnering with Deloitte Digital?
Oh, yeah, it's actually a pretty significant announcement, I think, for Twilio, particularly around Twilio Flex. Deloitte Digital is their first global SI, and I think it's going to open a lot of doors for them. Deloitte's pretty capable, and this is the Deloitte Digital Group, which has a focus on human experience. And so for companies that are creating a whole new digital customer engagement, I think it's going to be really good for Twilio Flex.
Cool. And very last thing, Zeus, why did CoreDial acquire Zeus?
Well, because the name's cool.
Yeah, Zeus. Oh my gosh.
I heard they were going to call it Zeus, but I wouldn't give them the rights to that. I think this is the continued theme of it's why High Five got acquired, right? This is the continued theme that you have to have a full stack solution. And the one thing CoreDial didn't have was video. Zeus, while they had a complete UC video voice stack, I think CoreDial really bought them for the video capabilities. So I wouldn't be surprised to see them shed the rest of that stack, keep the video. And it's going to be interesting to see how all these companies manage the partnerships they had, but also now they have their full stack. So that'll be fun to watch.
All right. Well, that's it for this week's episode of The Herd. On behalf of Dave Michaels and Zeus Caravola, thanks for watching. Make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel so you never miss an episode. I'm Kathleen Lassiter, and we'll be back next week with What We Heard.